Welcome back to fineLEARN. I am Kaustuvi and this is another lecture from the NCERT series on ancient Indian history. In this lecture today we will be talking about the age of the Satavahanas or the Satavahanas. Yes, now before talking about the Satavahanas in detail, about their political history or their material culture or their social organization, first let us try to just make a connection with the previous information that we have or the previous lectures that we have been doing, right? Now, if you have been following the previous lectures, you will know that after the Mauryas, that is after the decline of the Mauryas or in the Post Mauryan period, we know that there was the rise of different dynasties in different parts of the Indian subcontinent, right? Now, when we talk about these different dynasties in different parts of India, we know that some of these dynasties, they were actually native dynasties, right? Indian dynasties, whereas some of the dynasties that followed the Mauryas, they were foreign dynasties. Yes. Now, if we have to just sum up the successors of the Mauryas, right? In the eastern India and in central India, the Mauryas were succeeded by the native dynasties, which are Sungas. Alright, Sungas. If you remember, the founder of the Sungas was Pushyamitra Sunga. Yes, Pushyamitra Sunga, who was a Brahmin, and Pushyamitra Sunga, he was actually a general of the last Maurya king, who was Brihadrath. Yes, Brihadrath was the last Maurya king, and Pushyamitra Sunga, he was a general of Brihadrath, and Pushyamitra Sunga, he founded the Sunga dynasty. Right? Sungas followed the Mauryas in the eastern India and central India. Fine. And after the Sungas, we have the Kanvas who succeeded the Sungas. Fine. Now, if we have to look into the northwestern part of India, alright, northwestern part of India, we know that the northwestern frontier of India, and this we have already discussed in a separate lecture itself, yes, the northwestern frontier of India, because of the unguarded nature of the frontier and also because of the accessible mountain passes, we have a series of invasions, a series of foreign invasions that occurred into this northwestern part of India, right? And these dynasties or these invasions that happened were from Central Asia. Alright, and we have a series of Central Asian dynasties that ruled in northwestern part of India, right? Among these dynasties, we have talked about the Indo-Greeks. Yes, we have talked about the Indo-Greeks or the Yavanas. We talked about the Sakas, then the Pallavas. Yes, the Pallavas, and then we also learnt about the Kushanas. Right? So these were the different Central Asian dynasties or foreign dynasties that were ruling after the Mauryas in the northwestern part of India. Fine. Now, if we have to talk about the Deccan area, alright, the Deccan area, that is the Deccan Plateau, which you already know, that the Deccan area which covers parts of western India and also some parts of southern India, right? So, in that Deccan area also, there were different changes that were actually going on in the post-Mauryan period. Fine. Now, in the Deccan area, what happened is, after the Mauryas, we see that a major power or an important power that grew in the Deccan was that of the Satavahanas. Alright, Satavahanas. But we should understand here that the Satavahanas, they were not the immediate successors of the Mauryas. Alright, and there was a kind of phase which we can call as the pre-Satavahana phase, which lasted for around 100 years, where we find small or smaller, principalities, political principalities that grew in this area after the Mauryas. Alright. So after the Mauryas, we have different smaller principalities that grew in the Deccan, and after the smaller principalities, we find a major power that arose was that of the Satavahanas. Alright. And about these Satavahanas, we will be discussing in detail in this lecture. Fine. So this is a kind of map that you have in your mind now, right? Because now when we talk of the Satavahanas, you will immediately understand that yes, we are talking about the Post Mauryan period, right? And this map is actually important to remember the things easily. Fine, instead of just abruptly starting a topic, if you try to connect it with the previous information that you already have, it becomes easier, right? So let us get started with the details of the Satavahanas. Fine. Now first we will be talking about the political history of the Satavahanas. Now here I would like to tell you that there is some kind of uncertainty, alright, or difference in opinion amongst the historians regarding the origin of the Satavahanas, alright, regarding the origin of the Satavahanas. But then we do have different sources, okay, a number of sources from where we get different information regarding the Satavahanas, right? For example, we have the Puranas, yes, we have the Puranas, an important source for studying the Satavahanas. Then we have several Buddhist texts, alright, Buddhist texts, and then we have different archaeological evidences, alright, archaeological evidence. For example, we have coins of the Satavahana kings, then we also have inscriptions of the kings, yes. So we have these different information or different sources from where we learn a lot about the Satavahanas. And also we have Ptolemy's geography, and these are actually important sources that we have used for learning about the Satavahanas. Fine. Now, although we are not very clear about the origin of the Satavahanas, but we understand that the initial rulers or the early rulers of the Satavahanas, they were found in central part of the Deccan. Alright, the early kings, they arose in central Deccan. Alright, central Deccan, and these kings, they had their capital at Pratishthan. Okay, if you just look at the map here, this is Pratishthan. Here it was the capital of the early Satavahana kings. Fine. And from the Puranas, we find that in the Puranas, there is the mention of Andhras. Alright, there is the mention of Andhras, and in the Puranas, we do not find any mention about the Satavahanas. Alright, and it's seen that the period of the Andhras which was talked about, almost it's the same as the period of the Satavahanas, and so we consider that the Satavahanas are actually identical with the Andhras which are mentioned in the Puranas. Fine, this is important. Then as we have seen that the early Satavahana kings, they were found in central part of the Deccan, or we can say that the early inscriptions of the Satavahanas or the Satavahana kings, they are also found in Maharashtra, where we have Pratishthan, that is their capital. Pratishthan or Paithan, which is in Maharashtra, alright, was the capital of the initial Satavahana kings. Fine. And the earliest inscriptions of the Satavahanas, they also belong to this period, alright, the 1st century BC. 1st century BC, and during this period, the Satavahanas, they actually defeated the Kanvas, alright, they defeated the Kanvas, as we have talked in the previous slide. They defeated the Kanvas and they established their power in parts of central India after defeating the Kanvas. Fine. So we now know a few things about the Satavahanas, the history, right? Although their origin is not clear, but the early Satavahana kings, they appeared in central Deccan, yes, and their earliest inscriptions are found from 1st century BC. 1st century BC, when they defeated the Kanvas and occupied parts of central India, right? And the Satavahanas from Maharashtra, from central Deccan, they gradually extended to Karnataka and Andhra. Alright, and the greatest competitors of the Satavahanas were the Sakas. Alright, the Sakas, we have learned about the Sakas, which were a Central Asian dynasty, right? The Sakas, that means they were contemporaries of the Sakas. Alright, contemporaries of the Sakas. Fine, and we'll see that the Sakas, they were the main competitors or the greatest competitors of the Satavahanas. Fine. Pratishthan, that is Paithan in Maharashtra, and also Amaravati. It's here, alright, Amaravati. These were the capitals of the Satavahana rulers during different times. Fine. Now, the dominions of the Satavahanas in Maharashtra and Western India, they were actually at some point of time captured by the Sakas. As we have seen, they were the competitors of the Satavahanas, right? They were captured, these regions were captured by the Sakas, and these were again recovered by Gautamiputra Satakarni. Gautamiputra Satakarni was the greatest of all the Satavahana rulers. Fine, Gautamiputra Satakarni. Now, Gautamiputra Satakarni, he also defeated the Saka ruler Nahapana, and he even reissued Nahapana's coins with his own insignia. That means the coins, after defeating Nahapana, the coins which were issued by Nahapana were now reissued by Gautamiputra Satakarni after striking them again with his own symbols. Fine. So he reissued his coins. Fine. And the empire of Gautamiputra Satakarni, if you see, it will extend from Malwa in the north to Karnataka in the south. Alright. And the immediate successor of Gautamiputra Satakarni was his son Vashishthiputra Pulumai. Vashishthiputra Pulumai, and his coins and inscriptions are found in Andhra. Alright, so from these inscriptions, or from the places from where we find the coins and inscriptions, we come to know about the extent of the empires of these kings. Yes, the Satavahanas were defeated twice by the Sakas, defeated twice by Rudradaman. Rudradaman I, who is the greatest of the Saka ruler, right? We have learnt about Rudradaman I, his Junagadh inscription, etc. in our previous lecture. Yes, so the Satavahanas, they were defeated twice by Rudradaman I. Yes, and Yajnasri Satakarni, he was a later Satavahana ruler, alright. He also recovered some parts of Malwa and Konkan, which were also in some point of time captured by the Sakas. Fine. So Yajnasri Satakarni, he also recovered parts of their empire from the Sakas. Fine. And this is important point here. Yajnasri Satakarni, his coins had the representation of ships. Alright, representation of ships, from which we come to know, or which we can infer that there was a growing or a flourishing navigation and flourishing trade during his time. Fine. Now let us talk about the material culture of the Satavahanas. Now if we have to look into the material culture of the Deccan during the rule of the Satavahanas, we find that this culture was a kind of fusion of local elements, that is the Deccan elements from the Deccan, and also some elements from northern India. Right? And if we talk about the megalith builders of the Deccan, we have already learnt about megaliths, right? If we talk about the megalith builders, we know that agriculture and the use of iron, these were well known to the megalith builders of the Deccan, right? And from the megalith builders to the time of the Satavahanas, we do not find much difference in the type of the hose, alright, that were used by the megalith builders or during the Satavahana people. Right? What are hose? Hose are a kind of an implement like which has a long handle, right, and a blade, a short blade that is used for cutting out the top layer of the soil, or maybe even to remove weeds, right? So that is hoe. But we find that the number of implements has now increased. Alright, number of implements has now increased, and the hoes are maybe now more properly socketed. Alright, and apart from the hoes, we also find spades, sickles, plowshare, axes, razors, arrowheads, daggers, etc. During the time of the Satavahanas. And from excavations, we also find a blacksmith's shop that is discovered at a site in Karimnagar district, which is in present day Telangana, right? And we find that the coins that were mainly issued by the Satavahana rulers, mainly the coins were made of lead, alright, lead. And they also used a poteen and copper and bronze coins also. Poteen, it is also a kind of metal that is an alloy of copper, bronze, copper, then tin, lead, and maybe even silver. Alright, so we find that the coins were mostly made of lead, and the gold was not used for coins, whereas gold might have been used as bullions. Bullions means, bars, gold bars have been used. And we find that, or it is evident that the people during the Satavahana age, they have exploited the iron ores that are present in the Karimnagar or in Warangal district. right? And they might have even used the mines, gold mines of Kolar in Karnataka, right? So this is about the kind of coins that were issued. Now, even paddy transplantation, this was also a well-known art to the people of the Satavahanas, right? And the area that is between the Krishna and the Godavari, it was termed as a great rice bowl during the age of the Satavahanas, right? And Andhra was again famous for cotton cultivation. And even in foreign texts, we also find the mention of Andhra for cotton cultivation, right? And we see that a major part of the Deccan, or you can say a substantial part of the Deccan, they have developed an advanced rural economy, because of which they were also able to maintain or support a strong army. Fine. And we know that the people of Deccan, it's learned that the people of Deccan, they have learned the use of burnt bricks, ring wells, etc. from contacts with the north. Alright, so from contacts with the north, they have learned these things. And at a place called Pedabankur, which is again in Karimnagar district, we find the use of baked bricks. Alright, baked bricks, then brick wells, and also flat perforated roof tiles. Alright, and even covered underground drains are also seen at this particular site. Fine. And from records, it is come to know that the Deccan, it included around 30 towns, 30 walled towns, along with numerous villages. Fine. And we also find the Satavahana coins and even Roman coins in huge number, okay, in large number. And this actually shows that trade flourished during this period. Alright, and different ports have also actually grown because of the coastal region that was occupied by the Satavahanas. Fine. Now let us talk about the social organization of the Satavahanas. The Satavahanas, they were originally a tribe of the Deccan. They were originally a tribe who were later Brahmanized. Alright, and the Satavahana rulers, they themselves claimed, or they themselves called themselves to be Brahmanas. Fine. Even Gautamiputra Satakarni, who is considered as the greatest of the Satavahana rulers, he also claimed himself to be a true Brahmana. Alright. And he even boasts of upholding the fourfold Varna society, or the fourfold Varna system that was disintegrated. Fine. Now, as per the Dharma Shastras, what do we have? As per the Dharma Shastras, the ones, or the ruling class, was actually the Kshatriyas. Right, as per the Dharma Shastras. But here we see that in case of the Satavahanas, the ruling class were Brahmanas. Fine. And here this is again important. The Satavahanas, they were the first rulers who made land grants to the Brahmanas. Alright, land grants to Brahmanas. They not only made land grants to the Brahmanas, but they also made land grants to Buddhist monks also. Fine. And as we have seen, there was a flourishing trade and commerce during the age of the Satavahanas. And because of this flourishing trade, flourishing art and craft, we see that the merchants or the artisans, they have now come to occupy an important position or an important class of the society. So from this, it is evident that the position of woman or the position of the mother, it was an important position in the society, right? But then again, basically, if we look into the ruling family, we find that the throne was always passed on to the male member, from where we again basically find that the ruling family was patriarchal. Alright, so because the throne was mostly passed on to the male member. So this is about the social organization of the Satavahanas, and next we talk about the pattern of administration of the Satavahanas. Now the Satavahanas, if we talk about the pattern of administration, as per the Dharma Shastras, the Satavahana king, he was represented as the upholder of Dharma. And he was also represented as possessing or different, he was assigned some attributes of ancient gods. And this was mainly done to, give him some divine qualities, give him some divine, position to the king. Alright. Now the kingdom of the Satavahanas, it was divided into smaller districts, which was called Ahara. Alright. And the officials, they were called Amatyas and Mahamatras, as in case of the Mauryans, we see Mahamatras, right? Now we also find certain military and feudal elements in the administration of the Satavahanas. We find that the Senapati, he was appointed as a provincial governor. Alright, and we also see that the rural areas of the Satavahanas empire, the rural areas, they were placed under a Gaulmika. Alright, they were placed under a Gaulmika, who is not just the head of the rural area, but he is also the head of a small military regiment. Fine. And we even see that the military camps, different terms like Kataka or Skandavaras, okay. So these are actually terms which refer to military camps. Okay. So these terms are found in their texts. Alright. So from where we find that there was a kind of a military element that was there in the Satavahanas. Fine. During the age of the Satavahanas. Now the Satavahanas, they have also started the practice of granting tax-free villages to the Brahmanas and also to the Buddhist monks. Now because these villages were tax-free, alright, so they became a kind of smaller independent kingdoms, or small independent islands, not kingdoms, smaller independent islands within the Satavahana or under the Satavahana kingdom. Fine. Now the Brahmanas or the Buddhist monks, even they tried to preach, or they also tried to, maintain the social order. They tried to help in maintaining the social order in the empire or in the kingdom. Fine. They also tried to preach, and they tried to, teach the people, the common people, to actually, respect the political authority and thereby maintain a social order in the society. Fine. Now the kingdom here, it said that there were 3 grades of feudatories. Okay, it was divided into 3 grades of feudatories, and the highest grade was occupied by the king or the Raja, who had the right to strike coins. Alright, and the second grade was given to officers who were called Mahabhojas, and the third grade of feudatories was the Senapati. Alright, so these was the grade of feudatories, and you can say that the feudatories or the land beneficiaries, they also occupied, or they also had some kind of authority in the areas under their rule. Fine. Now let us talk about the religion of the Satavahanas. Now as we have seen, the Satavahana rulers, they have claimed themselves to be Brahmanas. Yes, and from the very beginning, the Satavahana rulers, they performed Vedic sacrifices like Ashwamedha Yagya or horse sacrifice, then Vajapaya, etc. And they also paid liberal fees to the Brahmanas for performing such sacrifices. Fine. The Satavahana rulers, they also worshipped Vaishnava gods like the Krishna and Vasudeva. Fine. And not just Hindu gods, they also promoted Buddhism. Fine. And they made huge donations to the Buddhist monks and also for Buddhist cause. Alright. And we see that during the time of the Satavahanas in their kingdom, there was a huge following of Mahayana Buddhism. Alright, Mahayana Buddhism was prominent during their time, and Nagarjunakonda and Amaravati, both in Andhra, these became important seats of Buddhist culture. Although we later see that Nagarjunakonda, it flourished more during the time of the Ikshvakus, who are a succeeding dynasty of the Satavahanas that ruled in parts of Andhra and Telangana. Fine. So Nagarjunakonda, Amaravati, they became seats of Buddhist culture. Fine. After religion, if we look into the architecture of the Satavahanas, we see that a large number of temples and a large number of monasteries were, cut out from solid rocks, and they are mainly seen in the Western Deccan and in Maharashtra. Fine. And two common structures are temple, that is called Chaitya, and a monastery, that is called Vihara. Alright. So Chaityas are temples which actually have a large or a huge hall with a large number of columns or pillars, and vihara, that is the monastery, it is constructed near to the chaitya, and these are constructed for the residence of the monks. Fine. And when we talk of chaityas, the chaitya that is found at Karle in western Deccan, the Karle chaitya, it is the most famous. Alright, because of the huge structure, the massive structure, and also the very finely and patiently crafted structure that it was. Alright, it's very impressive and a huge or a massive rock cut architecture. Fine. So Karle chaitya found during the time of the Satavahanas. Yes, and we also find viharas in Nasik. Okay, 3 viharas are found at Nasik, where we find inscriptions about Nahapana and Gautamiputra. Right, from these inscriptions actually we come to know about the victories of Gautamiputra Satakarni. Okay, these inscriptions were laid down by Gautamiputra's mother, that is Gautami. Fine. So Gautamiputra is referred to in these inscriptions as, the destroyer of the Sakas, destroyer of the Yavanas, and destroyer of the Pallavas. Alright. So all of these victories we come to know from these inscriptions. Yes. And during the time of the Satavahanas, the Krishna Godavari region, it became famous for the construction of a large number of Buddhist stupas. Alright. What are stupas? Stupas are actually structures, large round structures that are erected over, some kind of relic of the Buddha. Alright, stupas. And when we talk of Buddhist stupas, the stupas that are found at Amaravati and Nagarjuna Konda, they are the most famous. Fine. Now, coming to the language of the Satavahanas, the official language was Prakrit. Alright, and most of the inscriptions of the Satavahanas, they were composed in Prakrit and written in Brahmi script. Where did we see this? In case of Ashokan inscriptions, right? During the Mauryas, Ashokan inscriptions, they were also composed in Prakrit and most of them were written in Brahmi. Yes, we find the mention of a text, that is Gatha Shaptasati, which is written by a Satavahana king called Hala, and this text is also written in Prakrit. Fine. Now, after learning about the Satavahanas, at the end, we'll try to look into the decline of the Satavahanas. Alright, so we'll see how the Satavahanas declined. Yes. Now, the first ruler of the Satavahanas was Simuka. Yes, who is the founder of the Satavahanas dynasty. Yes, Simuka. After Simuka, we have a number of rulers, and the last ruler is Pulumai IV. Alright, Pulumai IV is the last ruler of the Satavahanas who ruled up to around, you can say, 225 AD. Alright, and after Pulumai IV, what happened is the Satavahana empire, it broke down into a number of smaller fragments. Alright, a number of smaller fragments, and in these fragments we find the rise of a number of different dynasties which succeeded the Satavahanas. Fine. And out of these dynasties, we can name a few dynasties. For example, we can talk about the Ikshvakus who ruled in Andhra and Telangana. Alright. Then we have the Abhira dynasty who ruled in parts of Maharashtra. Alright. And then we have another dynasty called the Chutu dynasty who ruled in Karnataka. Alright. So these are some of the prominent dynasties that rose after the Satavahanas. Alright. Now generally what happens is when a kingdom, or where a kingdom it actually declines, then there is another dynasty which comes up at its place. Okay. This might happen, or else what happens, sometimes the entire kingdom it gets fragmented into smaller parts, and this is what happened in case of the Satavahana kingdom. Alright, the kingdom it broke down into a number of smaller fragments, and then we see the rise of a number of dynasties in these different parts. Fine. So this was all about the Satavahanas. I hope the lecture was informative, and then if we go to the next lecture, we will be talking about the history in Deep South. right? In our previous lectures, we talked about northern India. Here we learned about the Deccan, and in the next lecture, we'll go deep down south. All right, and South Indian history, if we talk about from the point of view of exams, it is very important. We very often see questions from South Indian history, right? So subscribe to the channel, do like it, and if you have any comment or any feedback, do let me know in the comment section, right? Till we meet next, take good care of yourselves. Keep learning. Thank you.